Please be seated. In today's gospel, Jesus confronts the social injustices embedded in the religious structures of his time. He critiques certain scribes, not all, but those who parade their authority, demanding reverence while exploiting those they're meant to serve. They wear long robes, seeking public admiration and wealth instead of humility and service. Jesus sees through their hypocrisy and condemns a system that prioritizes wealth and power over the well-being of the most vulnerable. Imagine a widow approaching the temple treasury, placing in her last 2 coins. It's all she has. And while her action is often seen as one of immense faith, there's also a stark reality here. A religious system that requires her sacrifice without ensuring her security. Jesus' criticism isn't aimed at the widow's offering, but at those who, in their wealth and comfort, would demand it from her. The justice Jesus envisions is one for everyone, especially the marginalized, to experience dignity and care. Today, the hopelessness of prejudice and oppression can feel just as overwhelming sometimes. When we see the systems of our world seemingly aligned against the marginalized and witness social inequalities that feel immovable, it's easy to feel fearful and powerless, much like the widow might have. The challenges facing us seem as vast and unchangeable as they must have to her. Yet, despite the immense power of empire and the entrenching structures of inequality, Jesus preached good news, sharing the image of a world where the poor and marginalized were seen as children of God. Jesus proclaimed that the kingdom of God is near. And as followers of Jesus, we are called to not abandon hope. History has shown us that change, while sometimes slow, is happening. Across generations, we see how justice and human rights have advanced, especially in recent centuries. If you were to look at a graph of societal development and human rights milestones over the last 2,000 years, you would actually see an almost straight, flat line for 100 of those years before it steeply curves upward and shoots off the graph. Now, this rapid acceleration is the natural outcome of economic progress. But for some, it might feel like it's moving too fast. For others, it might feel hard to keep up with the constant changes as they ponder all the work accomplished in the 60s and 70s. But still, each decade, old layers of historical prejudice are exposed and examined. This process is unstoppable. As Martin Luther King Jr. observed, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But that bending does not happen accidentally or automatically. Justice is the result of the work and sacrifice of the prophets who came before us, including Jesus, Martin Luther King Jr., and the voices that continue to speak out for those who are persecuted today. The journey may be long, but the promise remains. God's realm is near, and it's our role to be part of its arrival. Imagine how our church community could embody a small piece of this kingdom, a bubble of God's realm, so to speak. Our baptismal covenant calls us to respect the dignity of every human being. To achieve this, we must be willing to empathize with those who differ from us. Imagine our church as a place where everyone feels like a beloved child of God. a place where each person's dignity is honored regardless of their status, background, or beliefs. Now, I want to share an experience that may bring this into sharper focus. Years ago, I found myself in a large group meeting where my beliefs came under fire. The discussion turned political, and as I listened, it became clear that I was in the minority. I was stunned as those around me began to sneer and joke about people who held my perspective. I remember feeling that flush of shame creep up my neck as I broke out in a cold sweat, sitting silently and realizing they were talking about me. Finally, with a shaky voice, I did speak up. Do you know that you are talking about me? There was a tense silence. The meeting convener rolled his eyes. Others seemed surprised as I excused myself to regain my composure. The result of that conversation was not a changed perspective. Instead, I left feeling alienated and silenced, more committed to avoiding these topics than ever before. At the time, I considered myself both socially progressive and conservative. And it was my conservative views that day that were under attack. This was not, by the way, an isolated incident. As a result of that shaming experience, it was years before I could comfortably engage in a constructive conversation about my beliefs. And I was not alone. There is a large group of moderates who no longer share the spectrum of their opinions because of the fear of condemnation by their peers on both sides of the red-blue divide. You can see the evidence of people with similar wide-ranging beliefs in the statistics of the most recent election. Now, ultimately, I took away from that experience an understanding that no one should be made to feel that way. And if I could be made to feel that rejected and alone when I actually live a relatively safe and secure life, then how did the more vulnerable populations feel? Fear is a powerful motivator that drives us back down that curve of societal progress towards our tribal instincts to close ranks and protect our own. And when a person feels that they are being shamed, it triggers a chemical shift that drives the brain into survival mode, shutting down the cognitive higher thinking processes. They cannot change their mind at that point. Words can deeply wound when we let division, judgment, and contempt take the place of compassion and curiosity. Jesus calls us to empathy, unity, and a courageous stand for justice without alienating or othering each other. In our polarized world, Jesus' vision of love for our neighbor may feel more radical than ever. But when we recognize that we are all God's children, we are reminded that despite our divisions, we share a divine kinship that continues to direct the moral universe towards justice. And this progress requires our participation, not through polarization, but through love and respect. In a world that feels harsh and unyielding, people today yearn for a safe place where all people feel a sense of love and belonging. And I wonder how we can better equip ourselves to have difficult conversations or to help each of us examine assumptions that may no longer resonate in a diverse world. as we strive to bring Jesus' vision into the world, how can we work to create a sanctuary here in our church where the dignity and belovedness of every person are celebrated, inviting all to experience peace, justice, and belonging that characterize the realm of God? We are called to be instruments of God's love, building a world where every person knows that they are valued, seen, and deeply loved just as they are in the eyes of God. And together, we can bring the nearness of God's kingdom into every corner of our lives.